Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, how are my snipers doing today? I hope you guys are doing fantastic. Listen, today we're talking about the one and only Zbeck network. You know me, ladies and gentlemen, you know I'm super high on this coin. You guys have been absolutely killing it with the likes, comments, the views, and everything. So just want to say thank you once again. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, right? Some crazy stuff has been happening. Before we dive into Zbeck, Bitcoin sold off thousands and thousands of dollars over the last day or so, right? We kind of topped at somewhere roughly around 124K, right? We had a very weak 4 hour candle, and you could just see, right, that 4 hours later, 8 hours later, 12 hours later, we just sold off all the way down to 117,500. We tried going back up for roughly a day before we then failed. And right now we are just sitting around 117,000. So, this is kind of crazy. This is kind of wild. The thing is, ladies and gentlemen, there's two things that's going to happen, right? This is either going to be this is going to be it for crypto in terms of Bitcoin, right? And we're going to start seeing other coins really flourish soon, or we are going to have some type of cycle again where we go down a little bit, go up, and then we really burst up. Okay. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, on the weekly, it is not looking too good. It is not looking too hot. The monthly is okay. It could be like the month of June where it kind of looks mediocre and then the next month pushes out. In terms of 3 month candle, it is fairly solid. But of course, if this 3 month candle does become very weak, then we're going to have to potentially talk about signs of, altcoin season and everything else playing out very soon. We know we have rate cuts in September. So the end could be very soon. It's either going to be over the next few short months, or it's going to be up towards of half a year, half a year more. So either way, one way or another, we are closer to the end than we've ever been. And personally, I find that kind of exciting. I wouldn't mind if, Bitcoin did have more in it and continue to push up personally, because that means then we would have a bigger drop. Something like Bitcoin dominance, ladies and gentlemen, is struggling around the 60%, right? We know that once it completely has multiple closes below 60%, then we will start selling off aggressively. But we can see the last few days have just been very slow, right? Nothing has really happened. So Bitcoin dominance refused to, it's refusing to die, which means altcoins still might suffer for a little bit. With that being said, let's just jump into Zbeck. We can see that the last few days we have been selling off, right? You can say, I guess, technically since the 7th of August. So already roughly a week and a half. But we've been selling off very fundamentally, which is what we love to see, right? Which is what we love to see. We go on something like the 4 hour, we can see that every time, we are currently creating lower and lower highs consistently on the 4 hour, right? Boom, here, over here at 0.0051, then another one at 0.0051, but this one's just a little bit lower. And then again, technically this does count. So, for me, we are still in a bearish trend, and most likely we will continue to be in a bearish trend for the rest of the week, right? I don't really expect the last few days, especially like a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, to really turn around. We could end up kind of going in a stalemate where we just go sideways, right? Because we are actually at a pretty decent zone right over here at 0.0046. But we know in terms of bigger zones, ladies and gentlemen, right, something on the higher time frame, we know that there's a bigger zone right around 0.004, 0.0042, right? That's like the main zone. So that's probably where I would expect Zbeck to really truly turn around, which would be probably down another 15%. Sounds like a lot, ladies and gentlemen, but do not worry, right? Once this thing gets the green light, it's going to start moving 10, 15% a day. That doesn't sound like a lot, but we are in kind of a fundamental mode, right? Which is good. We want to be fundamental because here's the thing, people, right? This happened with Turbo. It had a great one day of what, roughly 50 to 70%. I don't remember the exact amount. You have 37% in a day, but then the rest of the days it just, just retraced. So sometimes a big pump is actually a net negative because if the markets are looking to be very fundamental because they're ready to explode from their zone, then having a big pump, might just cause more delays. And in fact, so yeah, we will be monitoring things. I do ultimately think though that once we get back to 0.0042, it's going to be worth either leverage trading or dollar cost averaging because then the next zone is going to 0.007, right? Without a shadow of a doubt. Obviously, I don't have any confirmation yet that this is just pure speculations, but based off probability, this is what I would expect to happen. And you can see that's a 75% pump. Once we get to that 75% pump, we probably have a little bit of a retracement, probably a little bit sideways movement. That's because we're just ultimately building a big support on top of the resistance to then burst up. And once we start bursting up, oh, it's going to look good. If we just even take it from the Fibonacci zone, ladies and gentlemen, like this from here, and then we reverse it so we can actually see the next zones. We can see that 1.618 is always a nice zone, but it's a very high probability zone, right? It's usually a zone that gets smashed no matter what. For me, I'd be looking more at the 2.2. Now, I don't think we're going to go next level crazy, 3.2 or 4.2, just because, unless it's going to be in the context of altcoin season, um, I don't see this expansion happening that high yet because I do think, probably get to 2.2, then probably come back down, retrace to 1.68, and then slowly start making our way forward again, right? That's what something I would see most likely. And then once we kind of have this next zone, this is probably close to ready to start of altcoin season, and that's when we would start seeing really big pumps, multiple, possibly even multiple cents a day, right? Sounds kind of crazy to say now, but the reality is, ladies and gentlemen, altcoin season is the most unorthodox type of market conditions there are, which is why it happens, once every 4 to 5 years. It only lasts about 4 weeks because it's the craziest of craziest, but it gives you so much, right? Which is why people are crazy. Which is why people are also, upset that altcoins aren't really doing too much because when we go look at other altcoins, something like Caspa, right? It's fairly low from where it's been previously. Something like Flux, it's really low from where it's been previously. I mean, it's lower than its 2023 area. So Jasmine's very low. Ondo's obviously struggling. I mean, everything's struggling right now. But that's because, ladies and gentlemen, I ultimately think we're just preparing. We're slowly making our way up with all these altcoins because once the altcoin season happens, it's going to be crazy. It's going to be the most biggest money maker ever. I mean, anyone that gets in right before things start exploding and they only have to wait like a handful of months, they're the luckiest. People have been waiting since the end of 2022, 2023, even 2024. Some people have been waiting since the beginning of 2025. So, you know, people that get in at that right calculated time, good for them. Well, ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, do not give up. Zbeck looks good, right? Zbeck looks good. If we look at something like our altcoins, we are down a little bit, but that's also because, for me, even though we're down a little bit, if this weekly candle ends like this, for me, this is still another push to the upside with altcoins. So, despite it being red today, despite it not being the greatest, no, just have your hopes up. Everything's still looking good. Zbeck actually is technically green on the day compared to all these other coins. And yeah, that is it, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you guys did enjoy it, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Goodbye.